Hi, I'm Jerry Sparks, president of AG Financial Insurance Solutions, and we have once again with us Rich Hammar, renowned attorney, author, and all-around good guy. So we're here for Risk Management Live, and it's interesting on this subject because just this week I had a church call me and said, Jerry, we're thinking about doing a hayride, and is there anything that we need to know or do for hayrides? So I know that there's one church in Texas that thinks that we're doing this for them, but this is for anybody that happens to do a hayride. And I happen to know a little bit about hayrides because I live on a 200-acre farm and have had just a few hayrides out at my farm. So
how many accidents?
None, thank the Lord. I had, it is real important though that we're going to talk about some of the aspects because, I could tell you that we've had some near accidents, and all the people that are in my office that are watching this will say, Jerry could be a little bit safer probably, do things just a little bit safer. We try to add a little fun to it. So what we want to do is allow hayrides, but we do want to make them fun. So why don't you talk a little bit about hayrides? Well, first, before we get to that, if you have questions while watching this, you can type in your question and it will actually come to me on this iPad and we'll try to answer your questions. So just want to let you know that that is available to you. So Rich, our subject today is Hayride Safety. If we're going to allow hayrides, we're going to discuss what to do during the hayride and what to do before a hayride, but let's talk about hayrides.
Let me just put this in context, this risk, Jerry. There are a couple things about this risk that make it significant. And the first is, given the size and the weight of the equipment involved and the number of participants, whether they be minors or in some cases an adult group, you have multiple participants coupled with the size and weight of the equipment, you have a potential for significant, not just significant injury, but multiple injuries, and that's what makes this so unique. So if you have a rollover, for example, you've got perhaps 10, 12, 20 people that are going to be injured, and that in fact has happened in some of these cases. Number two is the fact that this is a completely unregulated activity, at least from the federal level. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, neither one regulates hayrides. And most states don't. There are a few exceptions. So essentially, we're talking about a dangerous but unregulated activity. And as you said, Jerry, we're going to be looking today at things that you can do to manage this risk, either before the hayride occurs or during the use of the hayride. So do you want to begin?
Sure. One of the things that being in the insurance business, we have actually had claims come in on hayrides. And the thing with hayrides is if you're going to have a claim, most of the time it's going to be a significant claim. So what we've learned is from those claims, and actually from my own tried and true testing at the Sparks farm, we're going to come up and go through some of the things to do before the hayride and then during the hayride. So first thing, if you hire a third party to do a hayride, so it's not really somebody from your church, it's not somebody that's doing it and there's not a charge. I understand people like me will do that for families and for the church. But if you hire a third party, ask for a certificate of insurance. Make sure the person that is doing the hayride gives you a certificate of insurance, especially if you're paying them. And make sure that the limit of insurance that they have is significant enough to take care of the amount of people that you have in the back end.
Possibly multiple severe injuries.
Yes. And actually the claim that we had, just to give you an example, the claim that actually happened at a church, what we had was we had a church.
A case you were personally familiar with.
A case I'm personally familiar with. We had a group from a church go to the camp, hire the next door neighbor to take them around on a road.
Because wasn't the church informed not to do it?
We told the youth group they couldn't do it. This was a different group than the youth group.
In
2
the
weeks
same
later,
church.
in the same church. So it was quite a surprise. But they hired the next door neighbor. He had $25,000 worth of property, our business, our bodily injury coverage. And he went on a public road, went around a corner a little bit too quick, and the back end of the trailer went over the edge and dropped out about 6 people. It ended up being about a $600,000 claim. The church ended up paying $550,000, and the insurance for the coverage person covered, I think, $50,000 is what they had.
So the point is be sure you have adequate insurance.
Make sure
and that's if you use a third person. What about a church that does it on its own? Talk about the insurance coverage issue there.
I would, number one, the church would normally have insurance. So what they need to do, if the church is going to allow a hayride, what they need to do, number one, is they have their insurance in place. And we can talk a little bit about assumption of risk forms if it's going to be an adult. I would have adults signing assumption of risk forms so they know the danger. I would have, if kids are going on the ride, I would have them actually signing parental consent forms. So let's just go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about things to do before a hayride.
Okay, and we're kind of free associated here. There's several recommendations we're going to make, not in any specific order. And the first thing I'd throw out, Jerry, is if you're going to have many hayrides involve minors. Sometimes they're elementary age kids, sometimes secondary. But if you're going to have minors, and in particular younger minors, you want to be sure that all the adult chaperones that are going to participate in the activity are properly screened.
I agree.
And so that's the first recommendation we would make. A lot of times, maybe you'll have parents show up or people that don't normally work with children in the church setting. And so maybe you haven't done background checks. And so a lot of times churches, these adults show up to help, they volunteer to help, and they don't know how to handle it. And sometimes the event is in the near future, you don't have time to do it. But just be aware that you need to plan these events well ahead of time so that you can properly screen adults who are going to participate in any hayride involving minors. So that's one recommendation we make. Another one, and this is not going to be popular, but is to consider doing the hayride during daylight, because at night the risks are compounded. The hazards on the path that you're taking, you can't see potholes and unevenness in the terrain as easily as you can, obviously, during the daylight. You're more aware of risks. And so if we recommend if at all possible, to restrict these to daylight hours. Another important point is, since you're going to be dealing with a highly flammable substance, namely hay, is to be sure there's no flammable objects on board, whether that be a lantern or some other light-emitting device that uses a flame. You need to stay away from that. Make sure that the wagon that you're going to be using is thoroughly inspected. A lot of times, maybe a church has somebody they know, like you, Jerry, that may own several acres, has a tractor, and hey, we'll use my equipment without any real proper inspection of that equipment to be sure that it's safe, looking for loose boards, looking for splinters, looking for the hitches. Do they have proper integrity? And you might mention the issue of sideboards as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I would suggest, and a lot of people will have a flatbed. It's too easy to fall off of a flatbed if you don't have anything on the outside. Yeah. So what we suggest, if you're going to allow a hayride, is that the wagon have sideboards. And what I would do is actually put the hay in the middle and have them face out towards the sideboard. So even if you do hit a bump, people don't exit the hay wagon. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, let's just talk about it. I would prefer that everybody use tractors. Tractors, in my opinion, are the safest for hayrides.
As opposed
to horses.
Or trucks.
Yeah. Trucks go too fast and can go too fast. Horses, you never know what's going to happen while you're out there. I own Belgian horses. I actually have a wagon. I have had it where a horsefly will bite that Belgian, and that Belgian could act up and take off. Well, you don't want to have 30 people behind you and the horse run wild.
Or a wild animal.
Or a wild animal. I've actually had that happen also. While we were
talk about that.
At night, which most people want to have the hayride at night because it's a little spookier, and you know, little funner with the night stars and everything, we had a coyote come out. And if I was on a horse at that time with a bunch of people, I'm sure my horse would have gone crazy. So I mean, because of things like that, I know that there was actually an amusement park here in Southwest Missouri. I won't mention any of them by name. And they used to do horse rides. They actually had to stop basically doing the amusement park because of claims they had with taking people on horses and wagons because of flies, horse flies, animals getting bit, and then the horses taken off and people, you know, falling and getting, you know, losing balance in the wagon.
So it's very nostalgic, the idea of having your hayride, your wagon pulled by one or two horses, but that creates unique risks.
Yeah, and I would actually not suggest it. And, you know, the thing that is, we need to make sure that everybody stays seated while you're doing the hayride. And with sideboards, you know, have a ladder so you can have people, you can have easy ingress and egress basically from the wagon. So with sideboards, it's easy for them to hold onto the sideboards. You get a little ladder and then go up. And I would actually have that as a lighted area because you don't want somebody missing a step. Most claims actually come from falls. So you don't want them falling, getting in and out of the wagon. You want to make sure that everybody stays seated during the whole ride. If they don't, they're out, okay? Because what you don't want to have happen is somebody standing up, losing their balance, and they get crushed by a wheel.
And that's, to me, one of the significant risks here. Yes, most injuries happen because of falls. Well, that could be a bruised arm, maybe a broken arm. But the greater danger is the minor, let's say, is laying there on the ground. The driver doesn't know that anything has happened. Maybe doesn't even know somebody's fallen off. And one of the rear wheels goes over that child. And we've seen cases where it's gone over the neck and broken the neck and killed the child instantly. So it's the weight of that wagon on these wheels. I mean, that is a toxic risk that has got to be avoided. So making sure, especially with minors, that they stay on board at all times. And if somebody falls off, that driver's got to be alerted immediately to stop that thing. And that can be done quickly if you're not going too fast. And that's why we recommend, and many other safety authorities have done the same, that you never travel, some say, more than a walking speed. And that's one of the reasons why doing hayrides on public roads is just insane, because you're not going to be going 3 miles an hour on a public road. Can you imagine a truck pulling a wagon with hay 40 miles an hour on a public roadway, and you got a bunch of kids on the back? I mean, it's just, that is not what we want to do. You want to be on non-public roadways, paths, etc., and they present their own risk because of the unevenness of the terrain, etc., and that's why you need to look at these routes in advance. You need to have rehearsals where whoever's going to be driving the tractor actually does a rehearsal of the exact route that's going to be taken, looking for hazards, becoming familiar with that route, and making sure that that is the route that is followed, and that there will be no spontaneous detours during the event.
Yeah, one of the things that I would tell you with the tractor and with the wagon too is, you know, you talked about doing an inspection beforehand, but make sure that that hitch is securely hitched, because you don't want to be going down a hill and the wagon, you see, all of a sudden you see the wagon passing you up.
Yes.
So, you know, check the hitch, check your tires, because actually I've been out on a hayride and actually have gotten a flat tire. Hayride's over because we got a flat tire. So, you know, you want to make sure that your tires are aired up properly, that your sideboards are secure in there. Another thing too is, when you have a tractor, you're the only one on the tractor. Okay, check the experience of who is driving the tractor. Make sure that they know how to drive the tractor. Make sure that they have experience in doing hay rides. But nobody else is on that tractor with the person during that time period.
Or in between the tractor and the trailer.
Absolutely.
A lot of kids like to stand there.
Well, and that's the reason why we say sit down.
Yeah.
And if you have everybody in the middle where they cannot go to the edge, you're a lot better off. I would also make sure that you have adults, enough adults to supervise the children that would be on a hayride, and make sure that you have adults up front by at the front of the wagon, so kids cannot get by that area.
You know, I think a good idea, Jerry, is using whistles for the adult chaperones, especially when kids are involved in the activity, to blow that whistle if the driver needs to be alerted to the fact that you need to stop. We do that on my sailboat. I have a very high intensity whistle, because when you're out there in 30 or 40 knots of wind, I mean, it shrieks. And my commands, I tell people on the boat, you must obey my commands reflexively and without question or hesitation. And, well, it doesn't do any good if they can't hear what I'm saying. So I use whistles and hand signals. And that's a good system, to have the chaperones with whistles around their neck on a lanyard. And if there's, for any reason, a need to stop that hayride procession immediately, the driver's alerted to that fact, that when he hears that whistle, he would do so. For example, a kid falls overboard, you whistle immediately and bring that thing to a stop to avoid the risk of wheels going over that kid.
I know not everybody has 200 acres where they can take people around the land, so some people are going to say, Jerry, you're being unreasonable, you have to go on county roads. Okay, so if you're going to go on county roads, my suggestion is that you have a reflector or lights on the back of the wagon. So if somebody comes up close, you've got a reflector. The other thing is, if you're on a public road, you have to have a car following you with their emergency flashers on, period. That way they can see if anything happens. And you know how it is with county roads. Not everybody drives 30 miles an hour on county roads.
Well, and talk about what happened to you last week.
Well, last week I was coming home from California, and it was midnight because our plane had ran into weather conditions. And of course, we live in the country, and one of the problems with going on county roads is hills and curves. And we came over the hill and stopped in the middle of the road. Was a car just sitting in the middle of the road. I don't know if they were looking at a deer. Yeah, it was foggy. It was foggy out because it had rained this last week. I mean, thank goodness I had enough time to stop, but I was sitting there going, my goodness, I don't know if they were looking at a deer. I don't know what they were doing. But I mean, it's just so hazardous, especially if you figure somebody is going 6 miles an hour or less and you don't have a car behind them. I mean, you come right up on a trailer, especially if they don't have a warning sign or lights, flashing behind that trailer. It's just too hazardous. Mm-hmm. And basically anybody runs into the back end of that trailer, you're going to be in trouble. And I will tell you, the church is going to get sued. You and I both know that. Mm-hmm. So reflectors or lights on the back of that cabin, back of the trailer, but also having a car follow them. I don't care if it's a truck or a car, but having somebody following them. And I'd say staying back, 20 yards or so. So number one, they can have their lights shining so they know if there's anything happening up in front, and they can honk the horn if there's an issue. Mm-hmm. The other thing is, they're the ones that are between you and the wagon if a car comes up quick against them.
Right.
The other thing too is, when you're looking at, because of hills and curves, try to stay off hills and curvy areas. I mean, if you can stay in a more flat terrain where people have a better line of view, you're much better off.
But the bottom line is, public roadways have significant risks. That they're smooth, but they're very dangerous because you're going so slowly and on a roadway where people are going 30, 40, 50 miles an hour or more, with curves, hills. And so that is a very dangerous venue.
A lot of them have minimum speed limits, and I can guarantee you're not going to be hitting that minimum speed limit, nor do we want you hitting that minimum speed limit. You're right.
And here's a couple other things. Benchmark. Check with other youth-serving charities that do hay rides. Check with your insurance company. Many times they will have recommendations, and your local police department for additional recommendations. If only adults are participating, they can, like you alluded to before, they can sign assumption of risk forms where they assume the known risks if they do so voluntarily, and that's a legal defense to you. So that's something else that we recommend. Of course, children cannot assume risks, and parents can't assume risks on behalf of their minor children. But there, we recommend a parental consent form where the parent signs a form consenting to the child participating in this specific event, a hayride, and lists any medical conditions with which the church may need to be aware in the event of an emergency. identifies people who can make emergency medical decisions in the event the parent cannot be located, provides contact information for the parent. We think such forms are extremely necessary. And anything else you want to say about that?
No, I'm ready to go to what you should do. Well, let's talk one more thing before probably the most important thing. Are you ready for this? Tell them what you expect of them. Tell the people that are riding in the wagon the rules before you take off.
Yes.
So you set the rules. You must stay seated at all times. No throwing hay while you're in the wagon. No throwing anything while you're in the wagon. They have to stay seated. They need to stay seated at all times. So anything that is done that is harmful, that could be harmful, the hayride stops, and they have to get out.
No flame.
No flames. No candles. No lanterns. Kerosene lanterns. Nothing that could be flammable. You don't want anything in the back. No smoking. I don't think most people. Well, you do have people that smoke. So I mean, no smoking while you're doing that.
Okay. Well, those are some of the things involving steps that churches can take before the event. A couple others, of course, never hitch more than one wagon to the tractor. Those are some of the important issues that we wanted to alert you to. And then there are a series of risks that deal with during the hayride activity, not what you can do in advance, but what are some steps you can take during the hayride activity to manage risk. Let's talk about some of those.
Okay, so we actually talked about reading the rules to them beforehand. They have to stay seated. All the participants have to stay seated while they're on the hayride. No throwing of the hay. No vehicle, or put a vehicle behind somebody during the hay. During it if it is on a public road. You mentioned riding around prior to the hayride, so the driver knows that the route that they're going to be taking. The other thing is making sure that you have an experienced driver.
Yeah, and with regard to the rehearsal, the route inspection you're going to do during a rehearsal, there are a number of things you can do. Like I say, become familiar with the terrain. And number two, look for any low-hanging branches that may not be visible in the dark. Look for low-hanging power lines that may not be readily visible at night. And again, look for the sharp turns, look for the uneven ground. It's just so important for that driver to be familiarized with the route and these potential hazards.
Yeah, actually limbs are, because it can be on the sides, it can be over top. It's real easy for a kid, and you've got eyes and everybody else, because everybody's looking, out during that time, and something can happen just so quickly. So one of the things that we like to do on our hay rides every once in a while is we would have the younger kids on the hayride, but the older kids from the youth group, we would stop and we would stop and tell a little story. And then the youth group would actually jump out and yell and scare people and stuff like that. So you can still have a lot of fun on the hayride while you're doing this, but just do it safely if you're going to have a hayride. I mean, again, no horses. Please use a tractor. If you can stay off public roads, stay off public roads. So anything else that we're missing?
I think those are the key points. And again, as we often say on Risk Management Live, there are always risks associated with ministry. And that does not mean you cancel the ministry. It means you manage the risk appropriately. And I think these precautions that we've mentioned today will help in you managing the risks that are inherent in hayrides, and that are, because you're dealing with, like we've said, a risk that is not addressed by any federal agency and by the vast majority of state and local agencies. So it's an unregulated risk, and that really imposes the duty on the church it heightens your duty to be sure that you're operating this activity in a safe manner.
We're going to actually be doing a blog on and giving you the safety rules if you decide to have a hayride, and we'll put that on our website at agfinancial.org. So keep those questions coming to us on questions and concerns that you have from a risk management standpoint. Thanks to the church in Texas for asking about hayrides this week. And we will see you next time on Risk Management Live. Thanks, Rich, for your time, and thank you for watching. God bless.
Thanks, Jerry.
Thanks, Rich.